for personal reasons and business reasons, and you name it, I have not wanted to open up to you until tonight. But the real reason we have made these changes, the real reason that you are seeing changes in me is my health. I was told by doctors just this last spring when we moved off this stage that I could no longer work as the way I had been working because it was literally killing me. About 5 years ago, right around the time we met in Washington, D.C. for 828, I had begun to have a string of health issues that, quite honestly, has made me look crazy. And quite honestly, I have felt crazy because of them. My vocal cord paralysis, my strange eyesight problems, and at first what we believed was just a simply very painful form of neuropathy. While I was at Fox, the pain would get so bad that my camera crew, God bless them, my executive producer Tiffany and our director Sarah, worked out hand signals so they would know when to take the camera off of me. We didn't know at the time what was causing me to feel as though out of nowhere my hands or feet or arms and legs would feel like someone had just crushed them or set them on fire or pushed broken glass into my feet. I can't tell you how many nights my wife would sit in the light looking at the bottom of my feet to make sure that there really wasn't any glass in them. At the same time, something else was happening that at first I actually thought was an advantage. I actually worked this one. I thought this was great. And it is the answer to the most frequently asked question of me. How do you do it all? Do you ever sleep? I would always say, oh yeah, not a lot. The real answer was, no. I could usually sleep maybe 2 to 4 hours a night. The great thing about it was I was never tired. We at a time talked about hiring a nighttime assistant. My daytime assistant would go home and my nighttime assistant would start at 6 p.m. and work sometimes until 2. That's how much we were working, and I was wearing everyone out. The doctors tell me that up until recently I hadn't had any even real REM sleep in maybe as long as a decade. I didn't have a dream that I remember except for one in that decade. And quite honestly, this isn't a symptom that you look to fix. If you have a ton to do, you're like, I don't need sleep, this is great. But the first sign of trouble that I noticed was what I call a time collapse. If we had met before, I couldn't tell you if it was a month ago, a year ago, when we were in high school. I didn't remember. I knew you and I could remember, but I didn't know it was last week. And I then began to lose names and faces, and over time, entire conversations would go away. This is early on, this is maybe 4 years ago, and the doctors told me that it was normal for somebody who was processing as much as I was at the time. They say that it happens to presidents, and even Winston Churchill wrote about it. While the essential facts remain, life becomes fuzzy, and your computing power just spits that stuff out. It doesn't have any extra space on the hard drive. Well, this was happening at the same time that pain was becoming a very big issue for me. They were telling me at the time there was no connection between the two. Then came the macular dystrophy and the vocal cord paralysis. All disconnected, or so they thought. I didn't think they were disconnected. That didn't make sense. I was a healthy guy. We went to doctor after doctor. We even looked into, is somebody poisoning me? What is happening? Every doctor I went to, each had a new finding, and they left me with more questions and no answers. I tried different diets. I tried medications. We moved to a warmer climate. Yes, this is one of the reasons why we moved to Dallas. Some things made it better, but really nothing worked. I think the brightest thing that happened early on, maybe 4 years ago, was finding a specialist in New York, one of the leaders in the field of neuropathy. I went into his office, and I honestly thought I was crazy at the time because I had this phantom pain. And it was like somebody had just broken my arm, and I swore it was real. And as I told him, expecting him to look at me like I was insane, which I was beginning to believe I was, he told me about a woman that he saw in the hospital the night before. She was flown in to meet with him. She had the same thing. He said that she felt as though she was stepping onto a bed of spikes. Every time someone would touch her or something touched her skin, spikes would be driven through her. We actually cried together in his office as he told me this and said how hard it was to examine. He just kept touching her and saying, "I'm so sorry, I have to examine you." Then there was something new that started with me. It was something that was happening to my body. I was going into a seizure-like state. This is me actually coming out of a surgery. I'm not aware at this point. It happens when I do fall asleep. It happens when I wake up in the morning. It sometimes happens during the day. It's most predictable if I'm on an airplane. It's why I don't travel commercially, because, the press would have had a field day with this. Anything with an altitude, I think, over 7,000 feet and pressurization, it causes me to go into a seizure. It also happens after extreme exertion, and it is worse after a performance or a speech or after a show. The staff that has been with me backstage or has flown with me over the last couple of years usually is pulled off to the side and has a quiet talk with my wife before boarding the plane to alert them what's going to happen to me. As sometimes we have found that it is harder on my friends to witness than it is on me. Most afternoons, my hands will start to shake or my hands and feet begin to curl up and I become in a fetal position. And when it gets real bad, my friends just kind of try to uncurl me. It has baffled some of the best doctors in the world. It has frightened me and my family, as we didn't know what was happening. About 18 months ago, I checked into a hospital in New York City for some extensive testing. I had some of the best doctors in the world look at me, from IQ testing, they did crazy tests, testing for seizures, concussions, EEGs, you name it. One of the most frightening points in my life happened during that hospital stay. I was given a test that's given to people with traumatic brain injury, TBI. I did so poorly on this test. The doctors shared the results with my wife and didn't focus on them with me. I never wanted to see the results. I knew I was functioning at about the bottom 10%. I knew when I couldn't figure out simple math problems or remember a series of words, I was in real trouble. I was told at the time that I would have somewhere between 5 and 10 years before I would no longer be able to function. I would be like that old man, except I would be 55. We could not figure it out. Something was happening with my brain. Was it stress-related? Maybe it's some rare disorder that began as a child, something else. Nobody could put their finger on it. But the life of Muhammad Ali and the way he functions was the image that I was left with, without any plan to get better. And things were getting worse quickly. I was told by doctors to go home and take a year off. This is the network that you are building. That won't work. I was told to take a year off and enjoy the days with my children. What I had always assumed my latter days would be like were not so distant anymore. The great thing is, I am married to a great woman, Tanya. Tanya and I never accepted that diagnosis. But we had to find a better answer. And at the same time, we needed to prepare.